Good morning and welcome. Kia ora koutou, as we say in New Zealand. I'm going to try a Turkish greeting, so apologies in advance if my pronunciation is not quite perfect. Merhaba, wie hoş geldiniz. Bugün burada sizlerle birlikte olmaktan büyük mutluluk duyuyorum. I hope that was okay. Because I am from New Zealand, it is customary in our culture to do a greeting in Te Reo Māori. This is a way to introduce who you are, where you are from, your family, your ancestry, and it goes like this. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki te waihi nei. No Tāmaki Makaurau, Aotearoa, Aho. No England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Norway, aku te puna. Ko BOWATER tōku whānau, ko Joanne tōku ipo, ko Luke, Ro, ko Ella, Amao Tamariki, ko Mark tōku ingoa. Nā mihi nui, kia koutou, kia ora mai tātou. I'll just talk a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk about Auckland, and this provides some setting for my presentation today. I've got over 40 years of experience in the park, sport and recreation industry. I have lived in New Zealand, Australia, and worked there as well, and England. But look, I'm passionate about parks. It's always been in my blood. I started in arboriculture, so I've been in the contracting world. I've had a long history in local government, 9 different roles in the Auckland region, consulting, and now I work for the central government, Sport New Zealand. But as I said, this is in my blood. I'm passionate about parks and everything that parks bring for our communities. I've also had quite a long history of involvement with industry governance and contribution. Recreation Aotearoa is the national peak body for parks and open space and recreation professionals in New Zealand, and I've been on the board there for 9 years, and I've been involved with World Urban Parks for around 7 years and 2 years on the board, so a very privileged position to be in. I'm going to give you a little bit of context about Auckland and where I come from. For those who are not so sure, we're way down in the bottom of the South Pacific, next to Australia, our big brother. New Zealand, a small country. Auckland is where I come from. It's a beautiful city, consistently one of the top 10 most livable cities in the world. Population around 1.7 million and growing 2 to 3% per annum. I would call it a lifestyle city. Very multicultural, has a unique geography. We're wedged between 2 harbours with 52 volcanic cones surrounding the city. In fact, the city is built on a volcanic landscape field. We are surrounded by abundant nature and open space. In 2010, our city went through a local government amalgamation process. So 7 local authorities and 1 regional council came together under a forced amalgamation process. I actually believe it was hugely beneficial for the region, and what it created was one, we call it a unitary authority, one large council, metropolitan council, and in effect it became the largest metropolitan unitary authority in Australasia, possibly in the Southern Hemisphere. What that amalgamation created was a huge, extensive parks system, and I was very privileged in my last role at Auckland Council to head up the Parks Services unit. This is 52,000 hectares, over 4,000 parks, a really significant system. And it was very much a system of local urban parks through sports parks, cemeteries, botanic gardens. But I think the jewel in the crown probably was the regional park system. And we have a former director, Digby White over here, who would probably attest to that. And when you have a city that is able to provide a peri-urban parks network that surrounds and buffers the metropolitan area from further growth, it is hugely beneficial for the region. In my time at the council, I led a number of projects. I was very privileged to be in a position to have some initiative to take this and really implement some change. This was born out of a desire to continue to grow and learn, challenge what we were doing, and I guess that ties with my interest in World Urban Parks. We were always looking outside of our sphere of work, outside of our country, and interested in what was happening around the west of the world. So a number of projects that I got involved in were initially very sustainability focused, but there's a little bit of a story here and it sort of lends itself to where I'm going with my presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these projects and that just helps build some context. The first one was sports fields. Our region, so Auckland has quite a wet climate, around 1,200 millimetres of rainfall per year. Most of it comes in winter. So we have a wet winter climate and we have a lot of sport. We're a very sporty nation. So we had a big problem with sports field provision and the reliability of it, constant closures. So we inherited this problem and it was one of the first big opportunities I had to set out to achieve some change. So sort of against the odds, I managed to secure political support for $85 million worth of capital investment to upgrade the playing capacity of the sports field system. This is over 800 winter sports fields. This program was based on a really comprehensive supply and demand analysis, which helped prioritise where the investment could go so that we could get the best outcome and return. It's always easier to invest in existing sports fields than it is to continue to buy new ones with land constraints, and Auckland is quite an expensive city for real estate. This program led to a significant investment in artificial turf, even hybrid turf, and these were some of the first investments of this kind in community level sport for the city. However, that investment, that huge investment in artificial turf, led me to really think about, we're putting a lot of plastic into the environment. Are we being responsible with this? What can we do to mitigate some of that adverse effect? So really, we kicked off a number of projects here. The Green Infrastructure Project, it brought together a forum of green thinking people to really tackle some issues. Green engineering symposiums, really trying to understand what were the components we were putting into the environment, where did they come from, what was their carbon source, what could we do differently. So we did quite a lot of work in this space, and that grew. We wanted to then understand, well, what does this mean for the whole parks network in terms of its carbon footprint? And when we talk about a carbon footprint, typically we're referring to a building, some built facility. So when we're talking about horizontal infrastructure, we're in a different space, but we still have essentially operational emissions, embodied emissions in the infrastructure that we're putting into the environment, and carbon sequestration, because we have a lot of green elements. Every green element, whether it be a tree, a shrub, turf, soil, even water bodies, will sequester and hold carbon. So we set out on a project here using our park graduates to try and understand what this looked like. And we built a whole lot of models around different park typologies and then extrapolated those principles that we'd learned to better understand the whole network of parks. And the key outcome really was, what can we do differently to lower emissions or optimise carbon sequestration? We then looked at, well, can we make a carbon neutral park? Can we gain a certification, an internationally recognised certification that will demonstrate what a carbon neutral park would look like? So we took our botanic gardens, and over a 5-year period, we implemented a carbon reduction emission scheme. We achieved that carbon zero certification, but we had to mitigate by buying offsets. So it is a commitment to a carbon reduction program over a period of time, but we learnt a lot in the process. The next opportunity was a greenfield development, a 17-hectare greenfield development in a growing part of the city. And all of these principles that we'd been working on, we were able to pull together, again with political support. Let's create a sustainable park, the first of its kind in the country. So again, this took a number of years to work through. The design process is everything here. So to help us with the design process, we adopted an infrastructure sustainability rating tool. Again, this is typically used for built infrastructure, the vertical stuff. So when you're talking about the horizontal infrastructure, there aren't many precedents around, so it's a little bit different. But when you're using an infrastructure sustainability rating tool, it is very principle-based, it's very structured, and quite challenging to work through, but we were determined to have a go at it, and we achieved the highest leading design rating possible. So in our part of the world, in Australasia, this was a leading project that demonstrated that you can apply these principles and make a huge difference. We were able to measure very robustly what those advantages and benefits were, from reduced water use, complete move away from potable water sources, a reduction in energy, a reduction in the embodied carbon in the materials used, huge reduction in waste, and an optimisation of ecological outcomes. And when you put all of this together, it matters. It builds up and it creates an environment that you can call sustainable. So that was just a little bit of scene setting for my passion for parks, my interest in sustainability, and my desire to always think outside the box and think a bit bigger. So I'm going to go out a bit now and just talk about a global perspective. It's another passion area. It's about livability. So we all know the world is urbanising. Over the past 100 years, global urbanisation has gone through a dramatic transformation, reshaping how and where people live. 100 years ago, less than 20% of the world's population lived in urban areas. By 1950, around 30% of the world's population were urban dwellers. In 2007, and I heard 2009 a couple of days ago, but around that time, for the first time in history, half of the world's population lived in urban areas. And in 2025, 56% of the world's population live in urban areas, more than 4.5 billion people. So where are we headed with it? Well, by 2080, some projections indicate 85 to 90% of the world's population could be urban. It raises a few questions, doesn't it? Where are the children going to play? Where will people recreate? Where are we going to connect with nature? So let's talk about livable cities. The Economist Intelligence Unit, EUI, Livability Index ranks city livability based on more than 30 indicators across 5 broad categories. It's no surprise to me that the majority of the cities in this 2025 outcome, around half are in Europe, and a fair number are in Australasia. So that's something that we treasure in our part of the world. We don't take for granted, but we're very interested in what makes that happen. So when you look at the criteria, livable cities are measured using indices and frameworks that evaluate multiple dimensions of urban life. These indices aim to quantify how well a city supports the health, well-being and prosperity of its residents. There are numerous versions of these indices, but I think central to all is green open space and access to it. Green space is important for livability because it contributes to health and well-being outcomes, such as improving mental health and reducing stress. Green space improves environmental resilience, increasingly helping manage stormwater and flooding events, and we've heard quite a bit about that at this symposium. Green space supports social equity, and I heard the term green equity yesterday. Love that term. And green space plays a key role in creating effective urban environments that people want to live in. We have some challenges with the way we are urbanised. How much open space do we need in high-density urban environments? This is a key issue. And I've got a project that I'm going to refer to shortly where I was able to really tease this out. What does best practice look like in terms of open space provision? What's more important, access to open space, quantity of public open space, or quality? Again, there have been quite a few discussions about this at the symposium. These are great questions and great challenges for us to be thinking about. So let's break it down step by step. Let's start with access to open space or proximity. The issue is, how far does one need to travel to get to public open space or green space? How can we measure it? Typically, proximity is measured in terms of perhaps walkable distance to a park or the percentage of population within X metres of a park. Quantity is next. The issue is how much green space is there for me to utilise. We can measure this through green space per capita. And the World Health Organization does have some guidelines and recommendations around minimum targets for this. Square metres per person, and percentage of urban area covered by green space. For quality and diversity, the issue is it high quality enough to support increased high usage? And are there different types of open space typology supporting different recreational experiences? There are different ways to measure this, but a quality assessment framework is a good way to start. It could be level of service provision based, and it could encounter design standards, materials, safety, amenity, and diversity of open space. We heard quite a bit about this from some of the research papers yesterday. So how much open space should we have in our cities? World Health Organization recommends a minimum target of 9 square metres of green space per person. And World Health Organization Europe advises every resident should live within 300 metres of a green space that is at least 0.5 hectares in size. UN Habitat suggests that 15 to 20% of urban land area should be dedicated to public open space and 30 to 35% to streets and sidewalks, totaling 45 to 50% of urban land for public use. I think it's really important here to think about public open space as it's not just parks, it's also about the street environment. And I think increasingly, as our cities become more and more intensified and urbanised, that street environment will play a key role in terms of our future open space access. So we can pull some of this together to form a best practice summary. Proximity to green space. Well, we've talked about 300 metres. Open space, green space per person. We have a benchmark of probably more than 9 square metres per person. Green land use coverage, 15 to 20% of the urban area. Total public realm, 40 to 50%. And let's add in urban tree canopy cover, again a key part of the public realm. More than 30% is often referred to as a target for livable cities. This is where I bring in World Urban Parks and the work that our organisation is doing. We're really interested in this. It's a key part of who we are, what we stand for, and what we're interested in. And it's all about future livability because people live in urban areas. So we recognise that parks, open space and green infrastructure do have a unique and significant role in creating livable cities and communities. And our vision and mission reflect that. We're here for the professionals behind those green spaces. Not only do we need access to parks and open space, but it needs to be healthy, it needs to be thriving, it needs to be biodiverse, it needs to support a really healthy ecosystem in its own right. A reflection here, and I think back to my own country, a colonised country. Often where we have a country that has been colonised, there are indigenous land values attached to land and people. And the way I frame it is there is a very, very strong cultural connection between the health of the land and the health of the people. It's very simple, but I've seen it expressed in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Australia, Canada in particular. It's a very common, strong theme. So when we are the stewards of parks open space, we need to be thinking about the health of the land. So this is about sustainability, it's about biodiversity, it's about nature-based solutions, so it's critical. I spent quite a few years on the World Urban Parks, Healthy Cities Committee. We pulled together this infographic just to help express the benefits of public open space, the benefits that accrue from having healthy parks and essentially healthy people and healthy cities. Healthy parks contribute to positive outcomes for mental, social, physical and environmental health. Healthy parks really are the heartbeat of healthy cities. I'm going to move now to a case study. This was a project that I was involved in. I learnt a lot through it, but I also brought in a lot of that thinking in terms of what makes a city livable. Melbourne consistently ranks as one of the world's most livable cities. In fact, it has been ranked as the most livable city for a number of years. That's due to a combination of factors that contribute to a high quality of life. This includes strong infrastructure, cultural vibrancy, safety and stability, education and innovation, multiculturalism, inclusivity, but perhaps most importantly, environmental quality and abundant access to green space and parks, clean air, water, proximity to beaches and nature reserves. The current population of Melbourne is around 5.2 million. By 2050, the population is projected to be 9 million, the size of London today. Balancing growth-related challenges with maintaining urban livability is a key challenge, which brings open space provision to the forefront. It's estimated that for the entire metropolitan Melbourne region, public open space amounts to about 20% of the total land area. And that's pretty good going. The extensive network of open spaces certainly contributes to Melbourne's reputation for being one of the most livable cities in the world. Because it's a rapidly growing city and it's quite centralised, the Victorian government very boldly set out to create a whole new underground transport system, effectively an underground orbital rail system. And you can see in the diagram, it's the green line, the orbital green line. So everything was centralised, the whole complete rail network, underground, overhead, essentially radiated in and out of the CBD. So creating an orbital rail line just created so much more potential for growth, and really they called it, the ability to unlock growth for the future of the city. So the Suburban Rail Loop project became a transformational transport and urban planning project designed to unlock the growth of the city. The largest single infrastructure project in the state of Victoria's history, and it will certainly help Melbourne move ahead and evolve into a city of centres. So it's a decentralisation planning process. And the Suburban Rail Loop Authority was set up not only to be the transport lead on this, but also the Urban Planning Authority. The first stage of the project was the Suburban Rail Loop East. This is the green side on the eastern area. Essentially, twin 26-kilometre tunnels will link priority growth suburbs, and structure plans were being prepared around each of these underground stations. At the time, I was working for Jacobs, an international consultancy, and it was a privilege to be invited to be part of this precinct planning process. So I became the open space assessment lead for the complete open space planning process between August 23 and August 2024. Certainly felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be involved in something of this size. So it all started with a structure planning process. And a structure plan, for those that are not so sure, excuse me, is a blueprint to guide future professional growth and changes over time. So it's really about how the city will grow and how that growth will be managed. Plans cover a wide range of matters such as transport, parking, housing, commercial development, community infrastructure, urban design, and certainly open space and everything attached to it. The 6 structure plans for the Suburban Rail Loop East project were critically important because they were going to unlock around 70,000 new homes. So we're talking about suburban Melbourne precinct planning that will radically change these areas into high density centres with 15 to 20 storey developments. So high density developments, these people are going to need community infrastructure and public open space, and the open space planning provision actually became one of the most contentious issues out of the whole precinct planning process. So we developed a methodology for the open space assessment, a very technical assessment divided into 5 stages. It started with reviewing the open space strategic policy context, case studies around best practice, and creation of a set of principles and a range of open space metrics and performance indicators that we use to assess the existing networks and the future open space needs for each structure plan area. At the start of an assessment like this, it's always necessary to define what do we mean by open space. This resulted in 3 categories. Public open space, which is accessible to all, restricted open space, publicly owned but with restricted access, and private open space. Privately owned was prohibited or significantly restricted public access. It's very important that we included those last 2, the second and third categories, because they became essentially really important for the future provision of open space needs. Open space classifications are typically defined by catchment and function. Local, district and regional catchments are commonly used to define the hierarchy and geographical distribution of open space. To ensure a general alignment with existing approaches, a review of catchments and functions adopted in a range of strategies and policy documents relevant to the structure plan areas were reviewed. What we ended up with was really a big focus around the local parks and further division into local, neighbourhood and community according to size. When we looked at the policy context, the role of open space, public open space in metropolitan Melbourne is contained in various documents. Plan Melbourne, perhaps, is the most significant. It's the Victorian State Government's long-term planning strategy for the future growth and development of Melbourne. And the key goal of the structure plan areas was to align with the 20-minute neighbourhood concept that came out of Plan Melbourne. Other parts of the world, 15-minute neighbourhoods are commonly referred to, but here 20-minute neighbourhoods. This is where all of your basic community needs can be met within a 20-minute journey, typically by walking, cycling or active transport. And open space for everyone is the Metropolitan Open Space Strategy that guides the planning and provision of Melbourne's complete open space network. And then locally, you've got local councils with their own open space strategies. It was really important to look at some case studies. So we spent quite a bit of time reviewing case studies around the world and across Australia, looking for comparable urban development contexts where we could find some useful metrics that had already been applied and some lessons that had been learned. So we looked at a number of case studies, and the review identified there is no singular standard of metric for providing open space that is consistently applied. So a range of metrics are used for measuring and delivering adequate public open space, with different approaches being customised for different contexts. However, there were a number of commonalities that were useful for this assessment. So we created a set of principles to guide the provision of future open space. These principles were developed with reference to those case studies, to the strategic policy context, and what we felt determined a best practice approach. A key consideration is that in higher density urban environments, greater focus must go on access to high quality public open space that will support greater usage. Accordingly, priority is given to planning for access, quality and diversity in the local catchment of these highly built up areas. This led to metrics. The development of open space metrics and performance indicators was a topical area. Metrics and performance indicators were adopted to shape the provision of future open space. These were developed with reference again to the policy context, best practice case studies, and in particular, a slight customisation to this approach. We wanted to have a high-performing open space network that was achievable, as well as being ambitious. The review of comparable case studies demonstrated that walkable access to all types of public open space is typically measured at 400 metres, okay, different from the World Health Organization recommendations. 400 metres generally equates to a 5-minute walk for the average person. Accessibility metrics like this are often combined with a coverage percentage. For this project, 400 metres walkable access for 95% of all residents and workers, really important, residents and workers, was deemed an appropriate metric. A quality-based level of service assessment was used to determine quality ratings for existing public open spaces, highlighting and prioritising where quality enhancements were required. While important to assess, provision metrics, quantity-based, are not a reliable indicator or effective measure of a high-performing open space network. Some might disagree with that, but that was my definite conclusion. One of the issues you have, of course, is as a city intensifies and population increases, quantity provision ratios decline. It's literally impossible to maintain or improve them. So let's just be real about it. It's more important to have access to high quality open space than it is to have a quantity of open space per person. But the key is access needs to be walkable and the quality needs to support high usage. So I'll just run you through a few of the examples of how this precinct planning worked out. I'll take Cheltenham as an example and just run you through some of the graphical analysis that we undertook. So the assessment of the existing open space network started by mapping and categorising all of the existing public, private and restricted open space within the structure plan area. The purple line indicates the structure plan area, and then there's a dotted line. This is a wider 1.6 kilometre catchment that was pivotal to the precinct planning. So when you have a precinct that you're planning and you're putting planning controls on, you think about public open space. People will walk outside of that precinct, outside of that structure plan area, to access open space. So we incorporated a 1.6 kilometre catchment. This was used across a number of the planning areas, disciplines. But it's all centred around the station. Right at the heart of this is the underground station. After identifying all of the types of open space, we applied the metric of 400 metres walkable access. So you can see here all of the pink shading is covered by 400 metres walkable access to open space. We then identified the significant gap areas. They were all numbered. Then we started looking at solutions for each of those gap areas. We looked at the quality of open space and measured this using a quality assessment framework. Again, this can be customised, but we referenced the GAL framework for public open space, and we looked at a number of examples of how quality had been measured previously, essentially coming up with a matrix of criteria that looks at a range of issues such as access, safety, lighting, shade, sunlight provision, and we also came up with a site potential rating, which helped prioritise where the improvements were needed most. We then looked at the residential density that was projected out to 2041. So the darker the colour here, the higher the projected density of people per square kilometre. And aligned with these principles, a high degree of access to public open space for residents and workers became a primary requirement in the highest density areas. So where we had a very high density, we actually looked for a higher level of proximity, up to 200 metres of walkable access. So we had a number of solutions. We put them all together, and when you look at this example, all of the green shading is as a result of an intervention, something that we will do either to provide new open space through development, acquire new open space, provide pedestrian access links, particularly to increase permeability through long block access. So a range of interventions were looked at. Where we could, it's about optimising the existing open space network. And we were able to achieve 95% walkable access coverage to public open space and a provision ratio of 12 square metres per person. So we managed to do this across all 6 areas, probably with limited purchase of new open space, incredibly expensive to buy land, so we were quite pleased with the outcomes. When we looked at all of this coming together, in summary, future open space needs can be met with a combination of approaches through new developments, land acquisitions, new public open space, prioritise quality enhancements, new pedestrian linkages to unlock and improve permeability, and shared use agreements for access to private open space. Collectively, we ended up with a very high level of walkable access to public open space and an additional 22 hectares of public open space to add to the network, which was quite an achievement. Number of key learnings from this process. It's never easy when you're trying to retrofit public open space into an urban context. Certainly one of the most interesting and demanding projects I've ever been involved in. And in central Melbourne, as I said, land prices can easily exceed $10 to $20 million Australian dollars per hectare. So that's prohibitive, but land acquisition was a key part of this strategy as well. But I think the most important thing, access and quality, become more important than quantity. And that's just a reality of where we're at. So access to high quality open space is the key. I'm going to pull this all together now to finish off. I've come up with a new concept around a livable city. It's called the 2030 50 400 concept. All right? You're the first to hear about it. So thinking about those best practice targets, let's start with 20% of the urban land area should be in parks. For this to be a livable city, we need 20% of the urban land area to be parks. We need tree canopy cover of more than 30%. "50% of the urban land area should be in public realm, streets and parks. As I said before, we need to include streets here because they will play an increasingly important role in access to open space as our cities continue to intensify. And the fourth figure is less than 400 metres, walkable access to public open space or green space, which equates to a 5-minute walk for an average person. So I asked my friend Microsoft Copilot to create an image to represent the 2030, 50, 400 livable city, and it came up with this image. However, I didn't think it was quite right. The urban density wasn't quite there. So I asked it to add some more housing. This looked better. And notice how much greener everything has become, even the roads. But it was still missing a few pieces. So I asked it to add a light transit system, some green roofs on the buildings, and some water-sensitive urban design. I quite like this. In fact, I love it. It could be our future green, livable city. So let's put a World Urban Parks sticker on it. Thank you very much for listening.